or one of the drivers. I think that dropping helps manufacturing countries, because obviously energy is cheaper. It means that it's cheaper for companies to produce goods, so that should be good. And the Indian economy seems to be growing at the moment, and I think that looks promising. So yeah, the low oil price should help. I think should help India. I think one of the other things I see is that there's a talent opportunity. So there's a lot of well-educated younger Indians, which I think our industry, certainly the energy industry, needs engineers, technicians. So that is another opportunity I think that exists. So I think that's quite healthy. But of course, the flip side to that at the moment is that the industry, well, certainly the oil and gas industry, has been having to lay off a lot of people. I think globally, since the beginning of this year, there's something like 175,000 people have been laid off, and so that may make that more difficult. But clearly, there's a good opportunity there. So I think India's got one of those economies now that's growing, it's driving forward, which is good to see. And certainly, as I've been talking around, there seems to be a lot of optimism in terms of the future. So growth, and again, as I say, I think the low oil price is helping.
You just spoke about layoffs. Now in India, we saw a point where our biggest explorer, ONGC, was recruiting people at the time when others were laying off globally.
Yeah.
Now, from your point of view, is it a positive decision on the right direction for ONGC?
I think so. In meeting with ONGC yesterday, I mean, they've clearly got they've got a very ambitious agenda, which is very interesting to see. They're looking to do lots of drilling. They've made more investments. They announced that new investment in Russia. So clearly the business is growing, and that's going to require more talent. I think, like all of our industry, we struggle to keep talent, because as people get experience, they want to move on. But yeah, I think investing in talent during difficult times is a good way of building capability, building resource. So I think it's a wise move. I think in the other areas around the world, I think what you're seeing is there's some areas where there's maybe overcapacity, and to right size, and because projects are being cancelled, I think there's a lot of reaction to, drilling has come down significantly around the rest of the world. The major projects have been reduced, so there's a lot of spare capacity in terms of resource. So I think that's what's driven the layoffs elsewhere around the world.
Do you think one of the triggers of what we saw recently of Shell and BG happening was this whole thing of manpower restructuring, resource cutting down?
But possibly. I mean, there's always, when you bring two organisations together, there's always savings that you can make. I mean, the most obvious thing is you've got two CEOs, and when you bring it together, you have one CEO, you have one management team. So clearly that makes sense, but I think there are probably other drivers as well in terms of looking at Shell were moving heavily into the gas area, BG a big gas player, and so the portfolio was very complementary. So I think it strengthened their position as a world gas player, and I think that's something that's sort of maybe more driven it. I think the oil and gas sector right now, and probably other sectors, it's really we've got to. I think it's a wake-up call about thinking we've got to operate in a more collaborative manner. I think in the past the models we've had are sort of a little bit outdated for the modern environment. So I think there will be some more mergers, acquisitions occurring. You can see that with Schlumberger. They've just acquired Cameron.
Okay.
So, there's clearly opportunities. But I think the industry, certainly the oil and gas industry, it needs to look at more collaboration and better ways of working and better use of the talent we have in the industry.
Talking about resource, and I mean, we have one of the finest institutes here, and in Dehradun, who knows it better than him. And the manpower which we have generated, and interestingly, when he was there also, many of the private players have picked on the brains from there and got us the largest gas field. And half of the people there on the field were from the Petroleum Institute.
Yeah.
So this kind of resource generation which we are doing, what is the kind of demand of such petroleum engineers in the global market?
I think it will be, I think it will be high, it will be good. But there's a need for more talent in our industry. I see the current oil price drop, that will recover at some point, and the activity in the oil and gas sector will increase again. And when that happens, there will be a need for talent. And I think when you look at India, I mean, through other organisations I've been with, India has always been a sort of source of technical engineering, technician talent that's been used either here locally or globally. So we use it now in our organisation. In our safety risk team, we've got we're exporting knowledge from India to Europe for nuclear safety. So I think there's a lot of opportunity there, and it's the demographics in many sort of European countries are changing. We're seeing a shift, certainly on the technical side, sort of an older demographic in organisations. And so you want to be able to bring more talent in, and there's clearly a lot of talent here. I mean, Shell have invested heavily. Bangalore, they've got a large operation. Organisations like Technip, who've invested, Chennai, big engineering centres. So I think there's another opportunity there for India. It's as a service sector, and we met with Vicky yesterday. And again, this whole thing about looking to see where the skill gaps are around the globe, how can they be filled, and how do you develop the talent that exists here to fill those gaps. So I think there's a big opportunity. So,
to sum it up, basically manpower resource, even in this sector, we have more than the actual mineral resource.
I think that would probably be right. But Middle East. I mean, if you look at the Middle East at the moment, on your doorstep again, talking to ONGC yesterday. I mean, there's a lot of investment going on in the Middle East. You're very close. It's sort of right next door. There's an opportunity to support the ambitions there, and the Middle East have got huge growth ambitions when you look at Abu Dhabi, Kuwait, Saudi. I think there's a big opportunity.
Talking about Middle East, and of course we are looking for opportunities there.
Yeah.
People do often talk about energy security.
Yeah.
And it has different interpretations. In India, what we have understood till now is acquiring assets abroad is a way of energy security.
Yeah.
But it has different meanings also, different interpretations also. How is it perceived globally when we talk or use the term energy security?
Energy. It does have different meanings. I think every nation, every government, one of the concerns is how does it continue to provide the energy that its nation needs. And I think we're seeing in America. I mean, America have had the shale oil, shale gas. That's made them energy independent in terms of having to import energy. So that gives a degree of security, but that in itself has impacted elsewhere because it's impacted the Middle East, it's impacted the sort of geopolitical setup. So yeah, I think we need to start talking about global energy security. It's there's a natural resource. It happens to be in certain locations, but for the world, I think energy is key. Again, looking at India, the energy demand in India is going to increase dramatically as the economy grows, as there's more money available, people can buy more white goods, more cars, more motorbikes, whatever. That will drive the use of more energy. People will expect to be able to use more energy in their homes. That will drive consumption, and it's about getting the right relationships. I mean, you can keep buying the assets and buying foreign assets, but there is a part of trading, and it's about how we work that as a world. And the other element to that, I think, is the environment and the broader environment. And we've got to look at the value of energy, the emissions, and make sure we can control that. And that's going to be a big issue towards the back end of this year when the governments come together and start setting new emissions targets. And I think all of those things are going to play a part. But I think energy security is important to everybody. It's really about how do we make sure we can continue to provide the energy to people, and I think that's going to affect the mix. I think India has a huge opportunity. I've heard a lot of talk in the last couple of days about solar power, and clearly that's a way, of within the energy mix.
Balance it up.
Yeah, nuclear provides a great long-term source of energy. It requires heavy investment, so that's not always easy, but we're seeing some of that in the UK now, Korea, Middle East, where they're investing in nuclear plants. So there's a sort of an element of looking at the mix of energy, how that can be provided, and that there is a long-term supply of hydrocarbons, but we've got to. There has to be a real move away from things like coal towards gas to reduce, to work to a lower carbon environment and hopefully improve emissions.
As they say, oil and gas, there's always a risk. The explorer doesn't know whether there is or there is not. You may have adopted the best of safety mechanism, but you really don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, anything can happen. If Gulf of Mexico can happen.
Yeah.
So in a situation like this, what kind of role does a company like Lloyd Register play?
We've got a couple of roles. I mean, safety and the environment is something that needs to be managed. It's a risk, and I think all good businessmen try and look at all the risks and try and understand how they can properly manage. I think we have a couple of ways we help organisations to understand what the risks are and to identify ways they can improve safety and environmental performance. We do that hopefully with also trying to help them improve their operational performance. So all of these things come together. The other part is helping companies make sure that things are being done rightly. So we help people understand that critical infrastructure is being built properly, that it's designed properly, that the components, the critical elements of them are manufactured or fabricated properly, and that the plant is operated safely. So we can do all of those things.
So how far is the contractor or the player for whom you're doing the project is willing to take your... I mean, investments are huge, but many times we see that the firms also have their set views, that this is it, this is what we want.
Yeah,
so where do you draw the...
I think what we found, I mean, I don't think there's been many instances where companies have not followed, and maybe that's the wrong word, but when we identify things, most companies generally are grateful that something's been identified if there's a problem, and then they look to improve things. So normally the interaction's fairly positive. You know, I think generally in business now there's a lot of responsibility. People take their roles very seriously, and certainly the big companies have very strong commitment towards good safety, good environmental practice, and we're there to help.
Since you've come from the other world, I just wanted to know what an often question, which he has answered for us quite a number of times, is why the big daddies of oil and gas always ignore India.
By the big
daddies, like the Chevrons and Exxons of the world.
Gosh, that's an interesting question. There are obviously assets here. I guess there's probably a combination of factors. It's where it's easier, possibly, to do business, where the reserves might be better. I think there's sort of decisions that way that drive people. It depends, what the different sort of fiscal regimes are. There's a sort of a whole combination of factors. I'm not sure whether companies deliberately say they're not going to go to India. I mean, companies like Ken have come here to operate. So why not the big ones? I mean, BG have been operating here for quite a while as well.
And exiting also.
Yeah.